Hello everyone! Recently I've been pushing my build further and I think I'm done with this character now. I've done just about every difficult boss in the game with ease, and as you can see from my Atlas tree, apart from Expedition and Simulacrum, I've already maxed out the rest and have been farming the T4 Pinnacle bosses to get rich. So, before I explain the build, let me showcase a few clips of how this build does the T4 Pinnacle bosses and how it maps.
You are too late. The fourth edict already burns for your world.
I need more time.
Her only salvation is written in ash. The Mother Soul must... Protect the ritual! Lonthor! Armak! The Wildwood's power is mine! You are seen! The end of living is nigh! This is not the end. We that dreamed, we in nightmare, we that are one.
I can't do that yet.
Thought by thought, destiny unwinds. We that failed.
Well done, Challenger. But there is one more trial you must complete. Defeat me, and prove your worth to Chaos.
Ah, a disciple of chaos. Face me.
Being obliterated!
Taste my true power!
My service is finally over.
And my service continues.
This battle is our sacred duty.
You will suffer the same fate as the great Varashta.
This Jinn courses with power.
There can be no escape.
I can't do that yet.
The sands tells early.
As you can see, this build is a one-shot build. How this build works is it uses Frost Wall to freeze the boss, and once the boss gets frozen, it would then give me time to use Conductivity, Mana Tempest, and then finally finish it off with Lightning Conduit. It's really easy to freeze stuff using Frost Wall, and for that reason, Frost Wall is the best choice to use in order to freeze, as the other skills hardly build up freeze against pinnacle bosses. Lightning Conduit's damage also gets a massive damage boost due to the support skill gem Biting Frost, which consumes freeze to do 50% more damage. Now you might be wondering, since this build is using the 3 Dragons helmet, which makes our lightning spells freeze and our cold spells ignite instead, how do we get Frost Wall to freeze then? For that, I'll be going over my gear choices now. For the weapon in Weapon Set 1, I'm using a wand with all spell skills instead of lightning spells. The reason for that is because of the comet in my cast on freeze. An all spell skill wand would increase the damage of my comet, but not a lightning spell skill wand. I'm using 3 Dragon helmets, so my lightning warp is able to freeze, which would then trigger cast on freeze comet to proc. It's also incredibly powerful to have lightning warp be able to freeze, as it's basically a giant frost nova. For my amulet, I'm using Everlasting Gaze since I'm on Eldritch Battery, so this would allow me to have Energy Shield. I have Lightning Rod allocated on it, as this node is incredibly powerful in improving my crit to non-crit ratio, which would give my Lightning Conduit a significantly higher chance of doing critical damage. For my offhand, I'm using a Scepter for additional mana regeneration, and the high amount of spirit it provides, so I can use Blink and Grim Feast. Malice on the Scepter is also pretty nice to increase my chances of critting. For my chest piece, I'm using a high-energy shield chest piece with some spirit. Since my helmet has been corrupted with Spirit Slam, this means with the additional spirit from my chest piece, I'm able to use cast on freeze and Archmage on both Weapon Set 1 and 2. Now this is the ring that makes the build work. With this ring, this means that even though I'm using 3 Dragons helmet, my cold spells can now freeze again, since my cold damage is converted to lightning damage, which in turn would freeze thanks to 3 Dragons helmet. For the gloves, I'm using this unique glove. This glove is incredibly powerful since it sets my critical damage at 300%, which means when I do a critical damage, it is 4 times my non-critical damage. Using Ingenuity Belt, as it enhances the effects of my rings, meaning I get much more resistance, cast speed, and mana. For Weapon Set 2, this is the weapon I use to cast my Lightning Conduit, Conductivity, Mana Tempest, Frost Wall, and Sigil of Power with. For that reason, since I'm casting Frost Wall with this weapon as well, I'm using spell skills instead of lightning spell skills as well. My weapon also has high amount of critical chance, helping me land that 300% critical damage bonus more often. Now let's go over some of the skill gems I use to make this build work. Sigil of Power increases damage on a multiplicative modifier, which is always good to ensure big increments. Now, my big hitter spell, the Lightning Conduit, I'm using Biting Frost since I'll be casting this only to finish off frozen bosses, and I'm using Hourglass, which adds cooldown to the spell, but it doesn't matter because 1 hit is all I need. Inevitable Critical helps to increase the chances of it landing a crit. Next is Lightning Warp. I'm using Magnified Effect on it, so the area of effect is enormous, which also applies to the shocked ground. And I'm using Overcharge to increase the magnitude of shock effect on the shock ground, since Lightning Conduit's damage is mostly based off shock effect. And I'm using Lightning Exposure, so Lightning Warp instantly applies exposure to targeted hits, which is a lot of increased damage. And I'm using Inspiration to reduce the mana cost, since it's pretty mana intensive. Next is Frost Wall, which is the skill I use to freeze bosses. Icicles help to ensure the wall burst easily, which would speed our freezing of the boss. Glaciation and Deep Freeze is pretty self-explanatory. Font of Mana is helpful since I noticed when I spam the walls, Sometimes I might not have enough mana to finish off the boss. Next is Ball of Lightning. This is the skill to enable Lightning Warp, so it mainly relies on using support skills that would create as much balls as possible. Now Mana Tempest. This skill is extremely powerful when used in conjunction with Lightning Conduit. It basically doubles your damage. Just be sure to use it only just before you cast Lightning Conduit, as it is very mana intensive. Conductivity. Almost the same as Mana Tempest. Very powerful in increasing your damage, as it increases the amount of lightning damage taken by a target. Now for my cast on Freeze, I'll be using Comet for the spell to trigger. Some people use Lightning Conduit, but I prefer Comet due to the large area of effect, and being able to utilize support skills such as Expanse and Spell Echo. And since my cold damage has been converted to lightning damage, this means my Comet is now lightning and can benefit off lightning exposure. Now let me show you my passive skill tree. This is what my tree looks like. Currently, my character is level 96. I won't be going over the nodes I chose, but basically the gist of it is, for weapon set 1, I went for area of effect nodes, shock magnitude nodes, and lightning exposure nodes. This is because I'm only using Lightning Warp on weapon set 1, and this ensures the shock ground always gives the maximum amount of shock effect and lightning exposure. For weapon set 2, I targeted mainly critical chance and lightning damage nodes. This is because I'm only using Lightning Conduit and Frost Wall for weapon set 2. It's also good to have Frost Wall do more crits, as more damage means better freeze buildup. These are my jewels I used to reach 100% shock effect. 100% is the cap, so I can't go any higher than this. As you can see, most of the jewels are double dipped in magnitude via shock and ailments. It's also important to have mana percent gained from kill, as it is needed to sustain my mana pool, which is why some of my jewel has mana gained from kill. That's about it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and if you like to learn more, I've included links in the description for the build, which includes the skill gems and passive skill tree for weapon sets allocation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.